to kind of sit there and really just do what the first or last person in the room tells him to do. You know, it sounds like a terribly chaotic organisation to me.
I mean, I think this cabinet that's in power right now is probably the worst cabinet we've seen in British history. There is zero business acumen here. You compare it, I heard you talk about Trump earlier on, and you look at the people he's around and the caliber of people that he has in his cabinet. They're all formidable, you know, incredibly smart people. And you look at what Sakir Starmer has around him, and some of these people, you know, I don't think they've had a serious job or in their lives in terms of, you know, outside of politics. They're clearly incapable when it comes to any economic policies. But I also think a lot of their political policies, it just seem as if they're based off university campuses. They don't seem like there's any deep thinking whatsoever with this group of people. So I think as bad as Sakir Starmer has been, I think that the rest of his team around him are also just as bad. I don't see anyone within his immediate cabinet that has any sort of brain to do anything.
And he's a man who clearly wants to be taken seriously, wants to be considered to be a kind of a world leader, wants to be on the world stage, but he doesn't act like somebody who is actually confident. He doesn't act like somebody who has got the command of all that he surveys. And he's very tetchy whenever he gets questioned about anything. Let's have a look at what happened yesterday. He was over in Brussels. We didn't really see much from the EU perspective, but we saw that he had a press conference with NATO in which he sort of basically pledged to keep working with NATO. But it was kind of not. It was all pretty pointless, but right near the end, Jack Elsom from The Sun asked him about the voice coach and whether he broke any rules over COVID. Have a look.
Thank you very much.
All right, that's all we have time for. Thank you.
Of course not.
Was your voice coach definitely a key word?
I mean, he's like indignant that any journalist should ask him a terrible, terrible question like, you know, did you break the rules over COVID? Of course not. I mean, he's like a sort of tetchy teenager, isn't he? You'd expect that from a 15-year-old.
Yeah, I mean, the first thing Sakir Starmer should be doing is asking for a refund from this voice coach. I don't know what this voice coach has added into Sakir Starmer's profile, because to me, whenever there's close to zero charisma from him. So I don't know what this person has brought into Sakir Starmer's life or into his journey in politics. But it's very true. It's almost, you know, I think he's going for that. I'm just an ordinary good guy. How dare you ask me anything to question my characteristics or question anything I do. I think because in some ways the Labour Party has been such a mess for the last 10, 15 years, and then also the way the Tory Party self-destructed over the last couple of years, I don't think he's actually had to get... there's not been a lot of questioning towards Sakir Starmer. People were so angry with what was going on in the Tory Party and the way they were almost killing each other on a regular basis. Right. I think a lot of people almost let Sakir Starmer off the hook. We never really... I don't think he got the scrutiny as an opposition leader in normal times that he should have got. And I think now, unfortunately, we're seeing this scrutiny applied to him, and we're seeing how bad he's doing to it. And the unfortunate thing is, he's actually now the Prime Minister, not just an opposition leader. Yeah. I think that's concerning.
And again, knowing what we know from this book that's just come out, he doesn't appear to have any great ideology, really. You know, they describe him, even inside his own party, as an HR manager. You know, Morgan McSweeney, again, doesn't apparently have any respect for him as a political kind of, you know, guiding light. Tony Blair, who was asked about him, said he's a bit like John Smith, but without the charisma. He's not a nutcase like Gordon Brown, but he's not really somebody that we can place all of our faith in. You know, he's a highly uninspiring individual. And he's going to cost the Labour government, at the end of the day, the next election, because he simply hasn't got the ability to be Prime Minister. Simple as that.
Yeah, I think definitely. I think there's a lot of parallels to compare with, so if you like, the Democratic Party in the US. There's a real lack of ideas, lack of philosophy coming from the left in general. And I think a lot of it, they've been almost captured by the far left movement within their own groups. And I think they almost need to steer away from that. I think it's very hard for them to move away because of the amount of power, although Corbyn's not there anymore, I think his deputies, the Angela Rayner's of the world, these kind of profiles of people are so still ingrained in the Labour Party, and I think they've completely lost their way. I think, traditionally Labour would have been the people for the working class people. These people seem so out of touch with the working class. They seem like they have no interest in trying to help the working class. And I think one of the reasons Keir Starmer spends more time abroad than he does in the UK, I just don't think he feels comfortable in the UK. Outside of Westminster, I don't think he has any idea what goes on in the country. I don't think he wants to. I think he feels very happy to be around bureaucrats, be around people like NATO, EU, where he can sit there and be the outside voice and, say a few words. I think he really likes that environment. Actually helping the everyday Brit, I don't think is his top priority.
No, I don't think he does. And I'm going to be saying to people all the way through the show today, give us an example or a definition, if you like, of Anglophobia, because forget about Islamophobia. I think there are people in this Labour government, and I count Keir Starmer among them, who actually hate Britain. I don't think they have any time for British people. They certainly don't have any idea what British people want or what they feel or how they're inspired. They don't like British history. They don't like British culture. They don't like the idea that we might have had at one time an empire which actually straddled the world and did great things. They don't like any of that. They don't like remembering it. They don't want it taught in schools. They don't want to have to actually answer to anyone in the European Union. Keir Starmer yesterday decided to do what? To go to the European Union, cap in hand, and sort of, get down on his hands and knees and beg them to take them back into some kind of trade relationship, which is already existing anyway. I mean, I don't understand what Keir Starmer hates about Britain, but I would love it if somebody could give us a definition of what is now Anglophobia.
I think you summed it up perfectly. This group of people have a serious disdain towards Britain, especially the working class people of Britain. Yeah. I don't know where it stemmed from. I don't know where it's come from. I think a lot of it is their new purpose, this kind of constantly talking about the white guilt and all this sort of issues. And I think it's so bad. And we're seeing it in the UK now. You look at the lowest and worst performing group of people, it's white British boys.
Yeah.
The numeracy rates are getting worse, the literacy rates are getting worse. And these group of people, these boys are going to turn into men, and these men are going to have to get jobs at some point. It is so bad for our job productivity as an economy. It's absolutely terrible, and they will never address this issue. Instead, they will continue to teach these kids that they should feel guilty, they should damage their confidence. You should, almost be submissive to everything around you, and it's exactly why he is going to the EU almost with a begging bowl and asking. Look at the comments Macron's made towards Keir Starmer and Britain, and he's still there having these conversations with him. I think a normal strong leader would have probably left the Brussels at this point after those comments and said, okay, I think you're really out of order for saying that.
Exactly.
We're going to focus on interest.
Yeah, but he won't do that. I mean, I thought exactly that yesterday, Sunil, when I looked at Macron and his kind of, puffing himself up to his full height of, 4 feet 3.5 and saying, Brexit has failed. Yeah, well, how about your government's failed, matey? How about the fact that you've lost 2 elections? The only reason you're still hanging on for grim life is because you've done some dodgy, scruffy, horrible, dastardly deals with people on the far left to stop right-wingers from taking over your government, which is their rightful place because they got the biggest vote in the last election. So don't talk to me about failed governments and failed government decisions, because France is an absolute basket case. Thanks.
But the whole of the EU is right now, and this is again the really bizarre timing of Keir Starmer going to Brussels. Europe as a continent has some of the lowest growing economies in the world. You look at Germany in a deep economic crisis, but even by their own standards, they've said that this is the worst economic period since 1990, since the reunification. This is the worst period in German economic history right now in the last 25 years. What is the attraction right now in Europe? These are economies that are faltering. These are economies that are going backwards in terms of growth. What Sir Keir Starmer should be doing is looking at he should be saying, well, this is a great opportunity. We've got the United States of America who are going to put tariffs on the EU. We could potentially take advantage of this and become closer to an economy that's doing better. You've got parts of Asia that's performing very well, even parts of Africa that are doing really well, to look at trade deals and all this stuff. But this obsession with the European Union, I think it's just to be around those bureaucrats, to be around those profile of people, make them feel more superior than they are.
Yeah.
They've obviously got elite class that they feel very happy and comfortable with, rather than actually sitting and thinking, I need to put Britain first. What are the best British interests? Maybe I'll have to go outside of Europe. Maybe I'll have to actually look at home, try to help small businesses and get rid of this GB energy nonsense and focus on the fact that oil has revolutionized this country, and we should actually maybe say thank you to oil. If it wasn't for oil, wouldn't be as far as we are as a civilization. All these kind of ideas he could be doing, but instead he wants to cozy up with Macron, with Germany, with the other EU leaders, because I think that's where he feels comfortable. It's not good for the country. I think it's only good for him and his ego.
Yeah, absolutely right. And it's good for N1, the Islington Mafia, if you like. Sunil, good to talk to you. Thanks very much indeed. Of course, just talking about GB Energy there, Richard Tice has got a